All right. One of the most frequent questions we always get is about certifications in our space, and it's a big question, so I get it. But I thought I'd put together another video on some general information about getting certifications, some maybe study tips and tricks and whatnot, and just some general ideas around the idea of getting certified, why you would do it, and all that stuff as part of our continued cybersecurity awareness year is what we'll call it as we wrap up 2023. But let's get kicking. So I get certified. The first question a lot of people ask is like, do you need to get certified in something? And the answer to that is no, but there are some advantages to doing so. Certifications, when used properly by most businesses, are an objective way to show that a candidate is familiar with some body of knowledge, right? The goal of a certification is to say that at a point in time, you are familiar with the information that the certification is supposed to cover. And for employers, that gives you a way to quickly say, okay, this person has X certification X. It means they're generally familiar with these ideas. Now, it doesn't mean you're an expert in something. There's lots of certifications you can get that, by getting the certification, you know more than somebody who doesn't have it, but you're not an expert in it because expertise generally requires both knowledge and application of that knowledge. And most certifications don't really test the application piece, although some are moving more in that direction with lab-based certifications and such. But ultimately, it's an objective criteria, right? There's a series of questions that everybody's measured against in the same way. By passing it, you say that, yes, you have the whatever level of knowledge the vendor who's managing the certification wants you to have. For others, another reason is it's just a clear goal. I'm a very goal-oriented person. Other people are goal-oriented as well. Having a certification for me to kind of chase helps motivate me, and I like that. And then for people who are going to work for service providers and other partners, we're required to have staff with these certifications, right? Organizations like VMware and Microsoft and Cisco want to make sure that if we're reselling our services or selling our services to implement their technology, that we have competent and capable staff on hand. And as a result, to maintain our partnership levels, we're required to have people with specific industry certifications. That's really the only time you need to have the cert is if your organization requires you because they're required to by their partnership. So there's lots of different reasons. Different people will get certs for different reasons. Me, I'm a very goal-oriented person, so that's my predominant reason. Choosing certs. So when everybody asks me, what certification should I take? My answer is like, what do you want to do? There's a lot of certifications. We'll make another video about it, but there's probably almost 500 security certs alone at this point, let alone other certifications. So you have to really figure out a couple of things. What's your goal? Is your goal just to help meet a partnership requirement? If that's the case, pick the one the partner tells you need to have. If your goal is career advancement, then what skill set will your next job or the job that you kind of want need you to have? And getting a certification in that helps get some of that knowledge going so then you can start learning to apply it. If your goal is just current job improvement, then what are you lacking? What are your weaknesses, right? The idea is that a certification is a way to acquire more knowledge on a subject, so you have to figure out what you want to learn. If you're not really sure, go talk to people who do the job that you want to do. Or go look online and say, hey, if I want to be a security engineer, what certifications are people who are hiring security engineers after? But choose certs that generally also interest you. Again, unless you're trying to just meet an explicit partner requirement, it's really, really difficult to motivate yourself to do stuff that you don't like. So a lot of certifications, while it's good to challenge yourself, you have to have some level of interest. I wouldn't encourage people to go do something they absolutely hate unless it really is just a requirement for their role. But me, I pick things that are of interest to me, that make me more well-rounded. So maybe things that I'm not already very high level in. I like to focus on things that I don't know a lot about because it keeps my interest better, but also just makes me generally better at what I do, I think. And things that make me stronger in areas that I'm weak, probably. It's very easy to go after certs for your strengths because then you can rack up cool certs and it feels good. But realistically, if your goal is to learn and to improve, you have to target weaknesses. So evaluate that kind of stuff. As you kind of figure out what certs you want to do, you have to start looking at what the requirements of a certification are. Different certifications have different requirements. You'll want to review the syllabus, understand what the expectation for the cert is. Is it targeted at you or your skill level? Is it something made for a person who has 15 years of experience when you only have two? Is it an entry level cert when you do have a decade of experience? Try to figure out what the exam looks like. How is the exam going to be given? Is it proctored? Is it online? Is it a lab? Is it multiple choice? Like, try to understand what you're getting yourself into. A couple of examples: the CCNA, obviously not a security cert, but a very, very popular networking certification, highly recommended. If you look at this, it's a multiple choice exam with some lab elements. I think this is the older version of it, but it's 120 minutes long. Yeah, bunch of questions, and it gives you kind of the breakdown of the topics that are going to be covered, so you can figure out if you're competent in these areas. If you flip through a lot of the requirements for different exams, you'll start seeing similar criteria like this. Some even give you some videos that give you a walkthrough of the exam. Other certifications like the CISSP, another very popular security certification. This one's longer. You'll see a unique element of the CISSP is the number of questions is a variable. And it's because the way the exam works is once you've mathematically passed a segment, they move you on to another segment. So you could have anywhere between 125 and 175 questions, depending on how many you get right and wrong in a given area. It's also a longer exam potentially. I think it maxes out at around 4 hours, but it also has other requirements. The CCNA has no prerequisite, right? You can just go and take it if you want. But if you look at something like the CISSP, you actually have to have a minimum of 5 years work experience that you have somebody vouch for and sign off on for you in order to get certified. So you can go take the test, but if you don't have the other requirements met, you don't get to be a CISSP. So understanding the requirements for a certification before you dive in is usually good to, prevent any kind of disappointment or letdown at the end when you finally pass an exam and maybe find out you can't be certified. The PMP is also similar. You need a set level of work experience along with passing the tests, things like that. Exams like the BTL2, this is from Secure Blue Team. This is a good example of a practical assessment, right? You'll see here that the exam is a 72-hour lab. It's not a multiple choice question exam, and it's not proctored. You take it from home on your time. Once you start the exam, you have 72 hours to complete what's effectively an incident response investigation. It covers multiple domains that the training covers, and you're able to work through it. And once you complete it, you submit it to them and they review it. There's no instant feedback that you passed or failed. If it's wrong or they see errors, they give you an opportunity to correct and modify stuff. And you have to get at least a 70% to pass. But if you get a 90% or higher, you actually get a cool little challenge coin or a gold challenge coin. So it's a different exam format completely, broad content, very hands-on, as opposed to the others, which are very, take an exam, multiple choice format, maybe some lab elements. Going into each of these exams requires different kinds of preparation, right? Like a multiple choice test, you're going to study for differently than a 72-hour incident response lab. And how you even just mentally prepare to go into the exam, how you plan for it, all very different. If you're planning for a 4-hour test, that's not really that big of a deal. You kind of just go to the test center, or if you're doing it online from home, you do that. Fine. But the BTL2, you have to have a couple days set aside, right? You're going to plan for a weekend to take this exam or take off some time for work or whatever you do to prepare for it. But you have to really understand what you're getting yourself into because, it varies a lot. Now, once you have your exam kind of picked out and you scoped out what it's going to entail, you need to start studying. And there's a lot of ways to study. I'm going to preface this with there's no right way to study. The right way is whatever, or there's no wrong way, I should say. The right way is whatever way you'll do it. Different people learn different ways. Don't let anybody tell you that you have to study a certain way. But here are some of the more common ones, right? Books, obviously the most common. Buy the book. Most vendors who make exams sell a book for the exam. Read it, understand the data, do the exercises in the book, take the practice exams. It has some pros. They're usually very dense from an information perspective. It's easy to kind of skim through. You could have a Kindle, you could have a physical book, you can jot notes down, you can do all that stuff. Some exams even let you use the books during the exam, like the GEOC certs from SANS. They're open book exams, so it makes 100% sense to use their books to study because you can write down everything and take the books with you. So understanding again the test structure is critical in picking study methodology as well. But books pretty straightforward. I think audiobooks are one that a lot of people overlook. I love audiobooks. I think most of my exams outside of SANS certs at this point have been audiobook based more than anything else. I like to sit in traffic, or I don't like to sit in traffic, but I would like to listen to audiobooks if I'm sitting in traffic or just on long drives. You can listen to them while you're doing other stuff. You can bookmark things. You can you can take notes. You can do it mobile. And often they come with like reference material. So you're not just getting the audiobook, but you're going to get like a note sheet or some other type of reference guide. The main con is there's no visual information unless you have that secondary info that they provide. So if you're a visual learner, audiobooks are really, really hard. If you don't absorb information via lecture very well, it's hard. And if the book doesn't have an audiobook version, which is pretty common currently, like they may not have an audiobook, or if the audiobook has a really bad narrator, it gets really difficult to listen to, at least for me. But still my favorite methodology currently. Videos are getting more and more popular. These might actually be the most popular way to study for certs at this point, and there are tons of them. There's lots of paid sources like Pluralsight, Udemy, sites like Anti-Siphon Training, like Secure Blue Team, and all these are TCM Security. There's a lot of good content being created currently around cybersecurity and certifications and things like that. LinkedIn Learning has a lot of stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's really, really good content out there. And then the whole world of YouTube and TikTok and every other content platform where there's free content. Um, the cons of videos are that there's really low quality control, right? You can't really, if it's especially for the free sources, like a lot of the videos are just people like me making content whenever they feel like it. So you have to kind of figure out which ones are good, look for reputations, look for reviews, and go with it. The cons of videos, it's also difficult to multitask. Like if you're not paying attention to the video, you're probably going to miss stuff. Most of it is meant to be watched, not just listened to often. And again, it's kind of hit or miss, right? If you're not a visual learner or if you're somebody who needs to be more hands-on for learning, videos aren't really going to help you a lot. Labs are becoming more and more popular, and I think are probably one of the better ways to study, especially for technology. It's much easier, at least in my experience, to learn by doing. So you can get hands-on. They can be engaging. They can be really simple or really complicated. But the problem is they're not really mobile. So I'm a person who enjoys studying kind of on the go. Um, and that means that, I like doing small bursts of, studying while I'm in line at a grocery store or waiting for someone to pick up someone or, anywhere where I have 5 or 10 minutes here and there to study, I like to study. I don't like sitting down for 2 hours at a time and reading a book. I just don't have the attention span for that. So labs aren't conducive to short bursts of exercises like that. But they are good for depth, and I do a lot of lab stuff as well. I have a whole lab set behind me. And organizations like Anti-Siphon Training have done a good job of making a lot of their work very lab focused. Secure Blue Team also same way. Their BTL 1s, 2s, I think the 3 is out now. Very lab centric training, which is very, very good for people to get hands on with the tools. Even organizations like SANS, their new GEOC exams have a lab element to most of their questions or most of their exams. So that's getting very hands on and more practical than just answering questions, which is really, really good. And then there's, things like apps and flashcards. A lot of the big certs will have an app associated with it. They're going to give you keywords to study. These are really good for like the PMP or the CISSP or any exam that's very memorization based. They're not good for generally learning how to put stuff into practice or large concepts, but they're very good for memorizing like definitions. For the PMP, you need to learn a lot of different inputs and outputs of different tools, and that's just memorization. It's not really like a practical application type scenario where you're trying to figure out how to use this stuff. You're just learning what each of the elements is, or you're learning a formula for something. CISSP is kind of the same way. Very helpful for that type of just memorization based studying, and it's needed sometimes. Sometimes you do just need to know the meanings of lots of different words. So very helpful and very good for being mobile and short bursts of study time. Like that's why I like them. I like using flashcards and apps as well. Test dumps. Every time we talk about certification, somebody's like, "Yeah, I'm going to go get these practice tests and I'm going to study those." Practice tests have a use. If you're using a practice test as your primary study method, you're not studying. You're using a test dump, right? Like it's not learning. You're going to memorize answers. You're not going to learn how to apply it. You might just have some, memorization of a concept, and you might get a cert, but you're going to be one of those people who end up not actually knowing the material super well. Is there a time and a place for it? Probably. Like if you just need a partner certification, then it's not something you actually do. Maybe, I don't know. But I generally don't recommend this method. I would generally stick with learning the material because that's the intent of certifications and that's what actually makes you better. Having a cert doesn't make you good at something. We kind of covered that. And earning your cert via a test dump also doesn't just make you magically better at something. So I would definitely stay away from this kind of stuff. Even if you start just using it as a practice exam, a lot of people just fall into the trap of getting this high level of confidence because they're good at the practice exam when really they've just taken the same practice exam 15 times and now know the answers, but they don't know how to actually apply that same knowledge to other questions. So I would skip this stuff. When to study. This is another one, right? Like study whenever it works for you. Don't let anybody tell you that you have to study for 1 hour a day at lunch. Don't say, hey, the best way to study is, 6 a.m. You study before anybody gets into work. Like those could be good times for you. And if they are, great, but figure out when is best for you. I've never been able to successfully like pick a set date and time to study and do that consistently throughout a exam or even through school or any of that stuff. I'm very much a when the mood hits, I go big and go go hard at something. When I'm not in the mood, I'm just not going to do it. And I find that for me, breaking it up into small 10, 15-minute segments, maybe a few times a day, even, is way, way, way more useful than me trying to sit down for an hour where I'm going to definitely get distracted and play on my phone and not study. So find the time that works for you. This will often vary depending on what the rest of your life looks like, right? Do you have kids? Do you have a family? Do you have, a dog that needs to go out? Do you have a job that is very, very demanding, or can you take breaks during the day? Do you have things outside of work and family that you have to, deal with? Do you have other obligations? You need to find a place to make this sort of work. So I think the key is understanding that it's a variable that you need to sort of figure out and then do the one that you can consistently do. And the biggest question we always get, especially when we're dealing with our own team members and stuff, is what happens if you fail? Yeah, don't worry about it. You're probably going to fail at some point. If you're pushing yourself, if you're trying really hard, if you're actually driving to improve, you're probably going to fail. Everybody does. I have. I mean, I've failed exams. I don't know anybody who hasn't failed a certification exam. I don't think. But ultimately, as long as you're pushing, as long as you didn't fail because you were negligent and lazy, like if you failed because you gave it your best shot, you genuinely tried, and you just didn't understand the material, it happens. Maybe you're punching a little heavier than you should, or you're going for something a little bit harder than maybe you're ready for. That's okay. Just figure out where your weakness was, figure out how to address it, study, and take it again. If you failed because you just didn't try and you got lazy and you're like, whatever, this will be an easy exam, that's kind of on you and you need to deal with that. But I wouldn't be afraid of failing. What I would say is if you fail an exam, go finish it. I've definitely seen people try exams and be like, well, I didn't really want that cert anyway. I think that's a really bad attitude to kind of get into and a really bad habit to get into. Um, if you start going down the road of studying something and you realize it's not what you care about, fine. But don't make that decision because you failed the exam. I think that's a really odd way to go about existing. And I think it puts you into this just really bad mindset generally of giving up when things get a little challenging. So you probably will fail at some point. It's not the end of the world. No one's going to laugh at you and make fun of you. Just get the results, figure out where you went wrong, fix it, and give it a try. I will say don't jump right back into it. Like I see people get pissed off when they fail and immediately try to retake an exam the next day even. Don't do that. Give yourself a little bit of breathing room. Relax, study up, give yourself a couple days at the minimum, and then try it again. Otherwise, you're probably just going to fluster yourself. And in poker, we call it going on tilt, right? Don't go on tilt after a cert exam that you failed and fail again. You're just going to waste your money. But that's it. Those are the tips for kind of getting through certifications. Yeah. If you have any questions or if there's anything I can help with, feel free to reach out. But have a great day, everybody.